Vivid verses.
The email arrived at 7:43 on a Tuesday evening. While I was standing at the kitchen island with a glass of red wine I hadn't yet tasted, watching the last of the light fail behind the building across the way. I read it twice. Dear Mr. Holloway, thank you for taking the time to show us the apartment last Saturday. My wife and I have discussed it at length, and we'd like to proceed with a formal viewing of the lease terms at your earliest convenience. We were also hoping to clarify the move-in timeline that Ms. Calder mentioned, as we need to give notice on our current place by the 15th. The second paragraph was brief and almost apologetic. They understood I was traveling. They didn't want to be a bother. They were simply following up because Catriona had been quite specific that decisions would need to be made quickly. I set the phone down on the marble. The wine sat untouched beside it. There is a particular stillness that settles over a man when something he has long suspected becomes documented. It is not anger. Anger is loud and wasteful and leaves residue. This was something cleaner, almost clerical. A drawer sliding shut. Catriona showed them the apartment as its owner. I picked up the phone again and reread the email a third time. Slower now, the way I would read a contract before signing. Ms. Calder. They had her surname. They had her phone number, presumably. They had toured rooms she did not own. She had given them a timeline. She had implied authority she did not possess. I'm not the sort of man who is shocked by what people do. I have watched men I trusted reach for things that were not theirs, and I have watched them do it slowly enough that they convinced themselves they had earned the reach. What separates the shock from the recognition, in my experience, is whether you have been paying attention. I had been paying attention. The redecorated hallway. The new key fob she'd had cut for her sister without mentioning it. The access codes on the door panel that had quietly gained 2 new entries during my last trip. Her friend Bree, who I had returned home one Sunday to find drinking coffee at my kitchen table while Catriona was out at yoga class, comfortable as a tenant. The slow, almost imperceptible reorientation of the apartment. Her apartment, in her telling of things to others, from a space I had invited her into a space she narrated as ours, and then, when she thought I wasn't listening, as hers. I had let it run, not out of weakness, out of curiosity, mostly, out of the desire to know exactly what I was dealing with before I dealt with it. There's a kind of patience that looks like passivity to people who don't have it. I have watched negotiations turn on the simple fact that the other party mistook silence for surrender. I picked up the wine, drank finally, set the glass down. Then I sat at the island and began to think. First question, do I confront her tonight? No. Confrontation tonight gains me a scene and loses me leverage. She would deny, deflect, tearfully reframe. By morning the story would be that I'd misunderstood, that the couple were friends of friends, that she'd only been helping. I would spend the next 2 weeks litigating her version of events instead of acting on mine. Second question, what do I actually have? I had an email from a couple, Mr. and Mrs. Oldenburg by the signature, that named Catriona, named the apartment, and described her conduct in language that no court and no reasonable observer could mistake. I had in my own building's records almost certainly some trail of when she had brought them up. The concierge logged guests. There would be a sign-in. Third question, what does she think the situation is? That was the more interesting question, and I sat with it for a while. She thought I was distracted. She thought my last few trips had gone long enough that her territorial expansion had gone unnoticed. She thought, most importantly, that the relationship itself, the comfort of it, the duration of it, the rhythms we had fallen into, was a kind of soft currency she could convert into harder claims. She thought that the man who had not objected to the new throw pillows would not object to the new locksmith. That the man who had let her sister stay a weekend would not object to the new fob. That the man who had nodded politely when she said, "We should think about putting my name on something," would, eventually, Not again. She had mistaken my courtesy for a glide path. Fourth question, what's the cleanest exit? The apartment was mine. Bought outright before I had ever met her, paid off, deeded in my name alone, no joint anything. She had no lease. She had no tenancy agreement. She had moved in 18 months ago, or 2 years, or somewhere in that vague stretch I had never bothered to formalize because formalizing it had felt unromantic and, frankly, unnecessary. The law in this jurisdiction was clear. A guest, however long staying, was a guest. Without a contract, without rent paid into a bank account, without a paper trail that elevated her to a tenant, she had the standing of a house guest who had overstayed. But, and this was the part that mattered, she did not necessarily know that. Or if she knew it, she had decided to act as though she didn't, which was its own form of strategy. I drank a second slow swallow of wine. The cleanest exit was the one in which she was simply not there anymore, and the apartment was simply mine again, and the transition between those two states was so administratively complete that there was no opening for renegotiation. No drawn-out conversation. No suitcases by the door for 3 days. No tearful kitchen scene that gave her an opportunity to recalibrate. I needed her to come home, at some future moment of my choosing, to a door that did not open to her. I needed her belongings to be elsewhere, packed by hands that were not mine, with a receipt and an inventory and a third party who could attest to the professionalism of it. I needed a paper notice, the right paper notice, drafted by the right person, to be the only document that passed between us on the matter. And I needed all of this to happen quickly enough that she did not have time to reframe, escalate, or solicit help. Fifth question, what's the timeline? She was at her sister's tonight. I knew this because she had told me, and because the location services on the family plan she had insisted we share, a small, ironic gift, confirmed it. She would not be back until tomorrow evening. That gave me roughly 20 hours to do something that was, in legal and logistical terms, not a small thing. I picked up my phone and scrolled to my solicitor's number. Patrick Vaughn. He was the kind of solicitor who answered his phone after 8 on a Tuesday because he had decided long ago that the clients worth having were the ones who never called for trivial reasons. He picked up on the third ring. Adam, Patrick, I need to move on something tonight. Are you free to talk? Give me 90 seconds. I heard him excuse himself from something, a dinner by the cutlery sounds, and then a door closing. Go. I told him, in the flat sequential way he preferred, what had happened. The email, the duration of her presence in the apartment, the absence of any tenancy, the locks, the access codes, the showing of the apartment to a third party as its owner. I read him the email verbatim. He was silent for a moment. Forward me that email tonight, he said. I'll have a notice drafted by 7 tomorrow morning. It'll be a notice of termination of a license to occupy, not a tenancy notice because she has no tenancy and we don't want to gift her the framing. The notice will give her 14 days, which is more than she's strictly entitled to, but it eliminates any argument about reasonableness. Are you set on her not being in the property when it's served? Yes. Then we serve it tomorrow afternoon, by hand, to her at her sister's address or wherever she is, with a witness. In parallel, you change the locks in the morning. You'll want her belongings out of the property and into storage before she's served, because the moment she's served, she may try to return. Understood. One more thing. Is there anything she could plausibly claim is jointly hers? Furniture or a vehicle, I thought. There's a small writing desk she brought when she moved in. A few boxes of clothes. Books. Some kitchen items. A stand mixer. I think a few serving dishes. Nothing structural. Nothing I bought for her or with her that I contest. Inventory all of it. Photograph all of it. The removalists will do their own inventory, but you want yours independently. Any item where ownership could be ambiguous, gifts, things bought together. Flag it, and we'll err on the side of including it in the storage unit. Generosity is cheap and protective. Agreed. Adam, one last thing. He paused. How are you? The question was not idle. Patrick had known me for 11 years. I'm fine, I said. I'm clear. I'd like to be done with this by Thursday. You will be. I hung up. I sat for another moment at the island, then I opened my laptop and began to make the calls that needed to be made. The locksmith was a firm I had used twice before. Once for the office, once for a property I'd briefly owned and rented out. They did corporate work, which meant they understood urgency and did not require small talk. I booked them for 6 in the morning. Full cylinder replacement on the front door, the secondary entrance, and a recoding of the building fob attached to my unit. Total time on site, 90 minutes by their estimate. The removal company was harder. The sort of operation I needed, professional, bonded, willing to do same-day inventory packing, usually required 48 hours notice. I called the firm I had used for my own move years ago, got their after-hours line, and spoke to a man named Declan who had the unhurried voice of someone who had heard stranger requests. Tomorrow morning, I said, 9 a.m. start. A 2-bedroom apartment, but only one person's belongings. I'll be on site to identify what's hers. I need full inventory, careful packing, and transport to a storage facility. I'll arrange the units separately and give you the address by 8. How many staff are you wanting? Whatever gets it done by 2 in the afternoon. For a one-person extraction, for men. We'll bring boxes, paper the lot. Are we packing or are we just shifting? Packing. Properly. Treat everything as though it belonged to someone you respected. There was a small pause. He understood what I was saying. Right you are. We'll be there for 9. The storage unit took 15 minutes online. Climate-controlled, ground floor, 10 by 15 feet, paid for 1 calendar month. The access code would be emailed to me by midnight. I would pass it to the removalists in the morning. Then I poured myself a second glass of wine and walked through the apartment. It was the first time in months I had walked through it slowly, deliberately, looking at it the way a stranger would look at it. And it was startling, even now, to see how much of her had crept into the corners of a place that had, 2 years ago, been entirely mine. The hallway, which I had once kept deliberately bare with a single dark print on the long wall, now held a row of 3 abstract canvases in pale dusty pinks she had brought back from a craft fair the previous spring. They were not bad pieces. They were simply not mine, and they had been hung at a height that suited her, not me, which meant I had been ducking slightly at the entrance for nearly a year without registering it. The kitchen had acquired her ceramics, a row of mugs in mismatched glazes, a teapot I had never used, 2 oversized salad bowls that lived on the counter because they didn't fit in the cabinets. The cabinets themselves had been reorganized. The plates I had bought a decade ago were now on the second shelf behind hers. The bedroom was the most thoroughly altered. Different bedding, different lamps, a small upholstered bench at the foot of the bed that she had brought up from her sister's house. Her dressing table, which I had agreed to without objection, had become the single largest piece of furniture in the room. I noted all of it. I felt, walking through, neither sentimental nor angry. I felt the way I feel walking through an office before a renovation, recognizing what stays, what goes, what gets reassigned. In the second bedroom, which I had used as a study before she'd quietly converted half of it into what she called her space, I found the most interesting thing. On the small desk in the corner, her desk, the writing desk Patrick had asked about, there was a folder. Manila, unmarked. I would not have opened it on a normal evening, because I do not open her things, and that distinction had always mattered to me. But this was no longer a normal evening, and the email from the Oldenburgs had recalibrated what was and was not appropriate to know. I opened it. Inside were 3 printouts. The first was a draft listing for the apartment. My apartment, described in the language of a rental advertisement. Stunning two-bed in highly sought-after building. Available from the first of the following month, 12-month minimum lease. The asking rent was substantial. There was no mention of me anywhere. The second was an email exchange between her and what appeared to be a letting agent named Francis Wilbeck. The exchange was 3 weeks old. In it, Catriona had described herself as the de facto manager of the property and had asked Francis about the standard contractual terms for a fully furnished short-term let. Francis had responded with a polite but probing question about whether the property was, in fact, owned by Catriona, to which Catriona had replied, and I read this twice, slowly. The ownership is in my partner's name, but the management of the property is entirely my responsibility. He travels extensively and prefers not to be involved in day-to-day matters. It was a beautiful sentence in its way. Every word in it was technically true, and the sum of them was a lie. The third document was a draft of something that looked, at first glance, like a handwritten list, and, at second glance, like a planned conversation. Bullet points in her hand. Bring up at dinner. Apartment underutilized when A, travels, could generate income. Propose I manage as gesture of trust. Emphasize his comfort. My initiative. Frame as practical, not financial. I closed the folder. I sat down at her desk and looked at the bare wall above it for perhaps 2 minutes. The thing I had not previously known, the thing the folder told me, was that she was not merely settling into the apartment as though it were hers. She was preparing to monetize it. She was preparing to rent out my apartment by some mechanism not yet entirely clear, with me cast in the role of an absentee partner whose comfort she would manage and whose involvement she would minimize. The viewing with the Oldenburgs was not, as I had first interpreted it, a peculiar overreach. It was a rehearsal, or, more likely, the first transaction of a longer plan. She is bolder than I had calibrated for. Adjust accordingly. I took photographs of every page in the folder with my phone. I returned the folder to exactly the position I had found it. I left her desk untouched. Then I forwarded the email from the Oldenburgs to Patrick along with photographs of the contents of the folder with a single line. Additional context came across this evening. May be relevant. His reply came back within 4 minutes. Highly relevant. Strengthens our position considerably. Sleep if you can. Notice will be ready by 7. I did not sleep particularly. I sat on the back patio with the rest of the wine and watched the city go through its small late motions, and I thought about how strange it was that the discovery of a more elaborate plot had made me calmer, not more agitated. There's a certain symmetry to a fully mapped problem. The folder had not changed what I was going to do. It had only confirmed that what I was going to do was correct. At 11, Catriona texted me. Hey love, staying here tonight. Breeze a wreck about the breakup. Probably back tomorrow around 6. Hope your day was good. XX. I looked at the message for a long moment. The instinct of a man who has been gathering documentation is to gather more, even when the gathering has stopped being useful. I considered, briefly, replying in some fashion that would lock in her arrival time, or extract some further admission about the Oldenburgs, or test what she would say if I asked an oblique question about the apartment. I did not. A reply now would be a tell. She was clever enough to read tone, and clever enough to read absence of tone, and any message I sent tonight that did not match the shape of every other Tuesday message I had ever sent her would register on whatever instinct she was running. The right move was the ordinary one. I typed good. Drive safe tomorrow. X. Then I put the phone face down on the patio table and finished the wine. The locksmith arrived at 5:58 a.m. His name was Owen. I had requested him specifically because I had used him before and because he did not ask questions that he was not paid to ask. He assessed the front door, opened his case, and began. The work was quiet, efficient, and entirely uninflected by curiosity. By 7:15, the front door, the secondary entrance, and the building fob system had been fully reset. He handed me 3 new keys and a printed code reset confirmation, accepted his payment, and was gone. Patrick's notice arrived in my inbox at 6:52. It was 4 pages, formal in tone, and written with the particular kind of precision that closes off avenues of argument before they can be opened. It identified Catriona by full name. It identified the property by address. It identified me as the sole legal owner. It established, in 3 concise paragraphs, that her occupancy of the property had been at my invitation and had not, at any point, constituted a tenancy or any other form of legal interest. It terminated that license to occupy, effective immediately, with a 14-day grace period for the collection of personal effects from a storage unit, address provided. It was signed by Patrick. It would be delivered by a process server he had retained, a woman named Helena Brask who had done work for him for years, at 4 o'clock that afternoon, to whichever address Catriona was at. I forwarded my approval. I confirmed the storage unit address. I confirmed that the removalists would have her property packed and removed by mid-afternoon, and that the timing of the service was to be coordinated against that window. Not before, lest she rush back. Not significantly after, lest the legal clock slip. Patrick replied, "Understood. Helena will be standing by. We're in good shape." The removalists arrived at 8:53. Declan was older than I had expected, late 50s, broad-shouldered, with the kind of hands that have been doing this kind of work for 30 years. His 3 colleagues were younger and equally unhurried. They came in with stacks of flat-pack boxes, packing paper, tape, labels, and the calm professional air of people who were going to do a job and had no opinion about it. I walked Declan through the apartment. "Everything in this room is hers," I said in the second bedroom. "The desk, the chair, the bookshelf, and all the books on it, the lamp, the rug, the contents of every drawer. Pack it all, right? In the bedroom. The dressing table, all its contents. The bench at the foot of the bed. The lamps on her side. The bedding, including the duvet. Replace it later isn't my concern. Everything in the closet on the right side. Everything in the bathroom cabinet on the left side. Right? The kitchen is the one you'll need to be careful with. There's a stand mixer, a teapot, a set of mugs on this rack, 2 ceramic salad bowls, a knife block she brought with her. That one specifically, the wooden one, not the magnetic strip, and a few pieces of cookware. I'll point them out as we go. Anything we should treat as fragile. The mixer, the ceramics. There's a framed photograph in the second bedroom on the desk. Wrap it well. Done. In the hallway, 3 canvases. They'll come down with the wire. Wrap them flat. Right. I walked him through it once more quickly. He took photographs as he went, dictated quietly into a small recorder on his lapel, and by the time we returned to the front door I judged a more complete understanding of what was leaving than I did. How long? By 1, possibly 12:30. The lads are quick when there's a clear list. Inventory in writing by the end. Photographed, itemized, and in your inbox before we leave the storage unit. We'll do a second pass at the unit to confirm everything's transferred and intact. Good. I left them to it and went into my study with a coffee and closed the door. There is a particular kind of work that goes well when something in your house is being dismantled. I read 3 reports, answered a dozen emails, and made 1 call that had been waiting for 2 days. The packing sounded at intervals through the door, the soft tear of tape, the rustle of paper, the muted thud of a box being filled and stacked. The sounds were oddly companionable. They were the sounds of a problem being solved by people who knew how to solve it. At 11:30, my phone rang. It was Catriona. I let it ring twice while I considered whether to answer. The calculation was simple. She was calling earlier than usual, which suggested either a routine check-in or that something had shifted on her end. If it was routine, declining the call would register as unusual. If something had shifted, declining the call would forfeit information. The cost of answering was small. I had only to maintain the ordinary tone of any other Wednesday morning, and the benefit was the chance to learn what she knew. I answered, "Morning. Hi. Sorry. I know you're probably busy. Bree's actually doing better, so I think I'll head home around lunch instead of waiting until evening. Just wanted to let you know in case you were planning to be in." I noted in the small still room behind my forehead that this was exactly the move I had not wanted her to make. "I'm in meetings most of the day," I said evenly, "and out for dinner. The apartment will be empty from about 1. Take your time." "Okay. I might pop in the market on the way and pick up something for tomorrow night. Were you wanting fish or that lamb thing again?" She was reading my tone for any inflection at all. The fish or lamb question was the test. The right answer was the one I would have given on any other Wednesday. Fish if it's good. The lamb was tougher than I'd have liked last time. Was it? I thought it was all right. "Okay, fish it is. See you tonight." "See you." I ended the call. Then I walked out of the study and found Declan in the kitchen, supervising the wrapping of the stand mixer. "Change of plans," I said. "She's coming home early. I need everything out of here by 12:15. He looked at me, then at his watch, then at his 3 colleagues, then back at me. "It'll be tight." "How tight?" "Doable. We'll skip the hallway canvases. They're the slowest job because of the wire and the wrapping. I'll come back this afternoon for those, separately, and bring them to the unit myself." "Acceptable. Anything else?" "The bookshelves. We can move them with the books still on them if we strap them properly. Saves an hour." "Do it." He turned and clapped his hands once, and the apartment shifted up a gear. "I call Patrick. She's coming back at lunch. I need Helena to serve at 1, not 4. Wherever Catriona is at 1, that's where it happens." There was a half-second of silence on Patrick's end, and then, "Helena's already mobile. I'll redirect her. Send me an updated location ping if you can get one without raising flags." "I can." I checked the family plan map. Catriona's location pinged at her sister's. Still. I screenshot it and sent it to Patrick. "Likely to leave there within the next 90 minutes. Helena will sit on the location and serve when Catriona moves," Patrick said. "If Catriona returns home before service, Helena will serve at the building entrance. Either way, the notice is delivered before Catriona reaches the apartment door." "Good." I returned to the study. I sat down. I drank the rest of the cold coffee, and I noticed, with some interest, that my pulse was entirely steady. There is a stage in any decisive action, and I have been in enough of them to know, where the planning is over and what remains is the watching of the plan as it executes around you. You become, briefly, a passenger in a motion you started. The temptation in this stage is to interfere, to refine, to add. The discipline is to let the plan do its work. I let it do its work. By 11:55, the bedroom was empty. By 12:08, the second bedroom was empty. By 12:21, the kitchen items had been boxed, inventoried, and loaded. By 12:29, the 4 men were standing in the front hall with the last of the boxes, the apartment behind them suddenly and shockingly bare in the places where it had been most occupied. The long desk gone from the second bedroom. The dressing table absent from the wall it had stood against for nearly 2 years. The upholstered bench gone from the foot of the bed. The hallway canvases were still up, as agreed. Declan had left a small folded note for himself on the entry table, a reminder. "We'll be at the unit in 40 minutes, Declan said. "Inventory to you by 2. I'll come back for the canvases at 3. "Good. Thank you." He nodded once. The nod of a man who had done good work and was not going to make a moment of it, and they left. The apartment, with the door closed behind them, was suddenly and completely silent. I walked through it slowly again. The hallway still had her 3 canvases, which gave it a temporary look of occupancy. But everything else, the bedroom, the second bedroom, the kitchen, the bathroom, had been pared back to itself. Not sterilized, not stripped, simply returned to a state in which the only person living in it was me. It was startling how quickly a space could remember itself. I stood for a moment in the second bedroom, where a desk had been. The wall behind where the desk had stood was slightly lighter than the wall around it, the rectangular outline of 2 years of sun fade. I noted it. I would deal with it later. At 12:48, my phone rang again. It was Patrick. Helena has eyes on her. Catriona left her sisters at 12:35. Helena's tailing at distance. She'll serve at the building. Understood. Adam, after service, Catriona is going to call you. She's going to be, in some combination, distraught, furious, conciliatory, and threatening. Do not negotiate. Do not apologize. Do not explain. Refer her to me. The notice contains my contact information. Understood. Stay where she can't reach you in person. Go to the office. Go to a hotel. Don't be at home. I'll be at the office. Good. I'll call you after Helena confirms service. I ended the call, picked up my keys, my laptop, and a jacket, and left the apartment. In the lift on the way down, I composed the only message I was going to send Catriona to be delivered after she had been served. Not before. Patrick had been clear that it should be brief, written, not spoken, and devoid of any opening for negotiation. I drafted it carefully in my notes app to be ready when the time came. Catriona, by now you will have received a formal notice from Patrick Vaughn, my solicitor. Your belongings have been packed and moved to a climate-controlled storage unit. The unit is paid through the end of the month. The address and access code are in the notice. All future communication on this matter should be through Patrick. Hey, I read it twice. I added nothing and removed nothing. I closed the app. In the lobby, I told the building concierge, a man named Hari who I had known for 6 years and who I had texted that morning to expect activity, that under no circumstances was Ms. Calder to be admitted to the building from this point forward. Her access had been revoked. Any inquiries were to be redirected to my solicitor, whose contact card I handed him. Hari accepted this without expression. I'll note it on the system, Mr. Holloway. Thank you. I walked out into the early afternoon air. The call came at 1:41. I was sitting at a small corner table in a cafe 2 blocks from my office. I had not, in fact, gone to the office on the calculation that the office had a receptionist who would let her up if she pushed hard enough, while the cafe had nobody who knew either of us, and I was halfway through a sandwich when my phone lit up with her name. I let it ring 4 times. Then I answered. Adam, what is this? What? There's a woman at the building. She gave me I can't get in. My key doesn't work. What is happening? Her voice had 3 things in it: layered, shock, rising anger, and a thread of calculation underneath both, the part of her that was already trying to find the seam. You should have the notice in your hand, I said. Read it. My solicitor's contact details are on the last page. He is the right person to address any questions to. Adam, this is insane. You can't just, all my things were my things. They've been professionally packed and transferred to a storage unit. The address and access code are in the notice. The unit is paid through the end of the month. Adam, will you stop talking to me like a form letter? Will you please just, I'm coming over. We need to talk about this. You won't be admitted to the building. There was a small, cracked silence. What? Your access has been revoked. The concierge has been informed. Please don't put him in the position of refusing you in person. Adam. Her voice had gone very low and very tight. What did I do? Tell me what you think I did. It was a beautifully constructed question. In another version of this conversation, a version with a different man on my end of the line, it would have been the question that opened a long argument. in which she would extract from me the catalog of her offenses one by one and rebut each in turn, weakening them by degrees, until the cumulative case had been dispersed into a fog of dispute, and what remained was the simple emotional fact that two people loved each other and were having a hard time. I had been in that argument before. I knew its architecture. "Catriona," I said calmly, "I'm not going to do this on the phone. You'll find that everything you need to know is in the notice. Patrick Vaughn is the right contact for anything else. Take care." I ended the call. I put the phone face down on the table and ate the rest of the sandwich. She rang back 4 times in the following 6 minutes. I let each ring through to voicemail without listening. After the 4th, the calls stopped. A single text came through at 1:58. "This is cruel. This is so much crueler than you think you're being. You have no idea what this looks like. You will regret this." I read it. I did not reply. At 2:14, I sent the message I had drafted in the lift. Verbatim. No additions. At 2:21, Patrick called. "Helena reports clean service." Catriona was at the building entrance. She accepted the envelope. She opened it. She read the first page in front of Helena. She became upset. She did not become aggressive, and she left in a taxi. Helena has a witness statement and a photograph of the timestamp service. We're documented. Good. She'll call a friend. Then a lawyer. Possibly. Most likely a friend first. Expect a second wave of contact from her, direct or through a third party, within 24 to 48 hours. Some of it will be apologetic. Some will be furious. Some may threaten action of some kind. Forward all of it to me. Respond to none of it. Understood. Adam. His voice softened by a degree. You did this well. The folder you sent me last night, the rental drafts, that was the fact that turned this from a difficult eviction into an unambiguous one. If she had been merely overstaying, this would still have been clean. But she had moved into something more aggressive than that, and you caught it before she landed it. That matters. It does. Go home tonight. Sleep there. The locks are yours. The space is yours. She won't come to the building. She now knows she can't get in, and Helena has informed her in writing that any attempt to enter constitutes trespass. If she contacts you, forward and ignore. We're done with the active phase. Thank you, Patrick. Of course. I went back to the office for the rest of the afternoon. I took 2 meetings I had been putting off. I responded to a stack of correspondence. At 6, I left. I stopped on the way home and bought a bottle of something good. Not extravagant, just better than the wine I had drunk on Tuesday, and a piece of fish from a market I had not been to in months. The doorman nodded as I came in. "Mr. Holloway." "Ari." "All quiet." "Good." In the apartment, I cooked the fish slowly with butter and lemon and a little caper, and ate at the kitchen island where, 24 hours before, I had read the email that began this. The hallway behind me still had her 3 canvases, looking strange now that the desk and the dressing table and the bench were gone. They looked, suddenly, like things that did not match the rest of the apartment. I would take them down on Saturday and put them carefully into a wrapped stack for collection. The note about the storage unit, the handwritten note, I wrote that evening at the kitchen island on a single sheet of cream paper from the desk in my study. Catriona, the unit is paid through the end of the month. Hey, I put it in an envelope with her name on it and addressed it to her sister's address. It was more than the situation required. It was precisely the amount I had decided to give. I would post it in the morning. I sat at the island for a long time after that, not drinking, not eating, just listening to the apartment. It was very quiet. It was the quiet of a space that had been crowded and was now, at last, only as full as it should be. Not lonely, not empty, simply restored to the proportions of a single life. On Saturday, I took down the 3 canvases, repainted the hallway in a warm, deep green the first had been considering for over a year, and rehung the long dark print I had bought a decade earlier and put into storage when she had moved in. The print looked in the new green exactly as I had imagined it would. The apartment, in the days that followed, did not feel like a place she had left. It felt like a place I had simply and finally reclaimed.
Thanks for listening.